Week 6 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few wide receivers I would start this week, especially with buys coming into play. The first guy's Amari Cooper of the Dallas Cowboys. So Cooper, he's been banged up the last few weeks with leg injuries, rib injuries, even a rib fracture I think's in there as well. But he's still going out there and producing with some decent fantasy days over the last couple weeks. Week 4 versus Carolina, 3 catches, 69 yards, and he found the end zone. And Week 5 versus the Giants, 3 catches, 60 yards, and a touchdown. So the Cowboys here in Week 6, they travel to Gillette Stadium to verse Mac Jones and the New England Patriots. And in this game, I don't know if the Patriots defense really can hold down this Cowboy offense. We just saw David Mills and the Texans throw for 300 yards last week in Week 5 versus Patriot defense. So I think Amari Cooper, he can make a few plays in this game. I don't think he'll have a monster game, but once again, 60, 70 yards I could see, and him finding the end zone. So he's a start this week. The next wide receiver is Deante Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the news came out a couple days ago. Juju Smith-Schuster is out for the season with a shoulder injury. And now Deante Johnson, that means more targets and more red zone opportunities for him as well. So Johnson, the last couple games since he came back from injury after Week 3's game he missed. Week 4 at Green Bay, 9 catches, 92 yards, and a touchdown. And Week 5 versus the Denver Broncos, only 2 catches, but he did have 72 yards, and he found the end zone on a deep one in that one. So right here, Week 6 versus Seattle, I think he has a great ball game here as Johnson. Seattle gives up the 6th most fantasy points to wide receivers, and now with Russell Wilson not in the lineup, I think we're going to see Seattle get off the field quicker with Geno Smith, the quarterback, and that's going to spell good for the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. So Johnson, he's going to get a lot of targets in this game, and he's going to get a lot of opportunities, and I think he has one of the better games that we'll see from him this season here in Week 6. The next wide receiver I would start this week's Cortland Sutton of the Denver Broncos. So I recommended to start him last week, and he had a huge ball game at Pittsburgh. 7 catches, 120 yards, and a touchdown on 11 targets. So right here in Week 6, a little bit of a tough matchup versus the Las Vegas Raiders. But right here, this Raider team is in disarray after John Gruden stepping down from the head coaching position with the leaked emails and all that stuff going on. But anyway, here, Cortland Sutton and this Bronco team, they lost the last 2 ball games. And right here in Week 6, in my opinion, if they want to win and beat their division rival here in the Vegas Raiders, they're going to have to rely on Cortland Sutton. He's a playmaker, and he looks 100% finally after coming off the torn ACL last season that he suffered. So right here, so far, he's been solid 2 out of the first 5 weeks of the season, but now more than ever, they're going to need him here. And Teddy Bridgewater, I think he's going to hand the ball out in this ball game. And Sutton, I think in this one, gets 80 or 90 yards and possibly finds the end zone. The next wide receiver is Hollywood Brown of the Baltimore Ravens. So Hollywood Brown, what a season he's having so far this year is Brown. And a big ball game he had in Week 5 versus the Indianapolis Colts with 33.5 fantasy points in PPR leagues, 9 catches, 125 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And in Week 6, he versus the Los Angeles Chargers, that I know they give up the second least amount of fantasy points to wide receivers, but the Chargers, they just gave up 42 points to the Cleveland Brown offense that, in my opinion, aren't even that good. And in this ball game, Lamar Jackson and Brown this season, they've been hitting big this year, where Brown scored at least 18 or more fantasy points in 4 out of the first 5 ball games this season. So right here this week versus the Chargers, I think he's good once again for another deep ball is Hollywood Brown. And it wouldn't surprise me to see him find the end zone with 80 or 90 yards with 4 or 5 catches. And the 5th and final wide receiver I would start this week's Emmanuel Sanders of the Buffalo Bills. So Sanders, the first 2 weeks of the season, got off to a slow start with his new ball team. But since Week 3 on now, he's been on fire. Week 3 versus the Washington football team, 5 catches, 94 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Week 4 versus the Houston Texans, 5 catches, 74 yards. And Week 5 at the Chiefs, he only had 3 catches for 54 yards, but added 2 touchdowns in that one. And now on Monday Night Football here at the Tennessee Titans, I think he has another good game. And he's a big deep threat for Josh Allen and this Bill team, with this team clicking on all cylinders now with big blowout victories the last 4 weeks in a row here. So right here, Tennessee gives up the most fantasy points to wide receivers. And I see another big game here for Emmanuel Sanders. So that's a few wide receivers I would start in week 6 of the fantasy football season.